What's up everyone, it's Endymion, and this video will be a fun one to make. As I previously reported on how Disney's Bob Iger has been pleading for the culture war to end, it seems like the destruction of Disney is not stopping anytime soon. And beyond that, we have some industry veterans becoming openly honest about how corporations make these decisions, and how oftentimes they really do have no idea what they're doing. And later on, I'll talk about how the American comic book industry is doing so horribly. Their overall slice of the money pie right now is in the single digits. I'm not kidding, you'll see. To begin, back during Star Wars Celebration 2023, Kathleen Kennedy decided to announce 3 new Star Wars films being in active development. One was Rey returning in a new movie, which nobody wants to happen. The other was Dave Filoni's Heir to the Empire film, which will tie up all the loose ends from shows like Mandalorian, Ahsoka, Rebels, and more. That movie is still happening. However, the last film announced was an Origin of the Force movie by James Mangold. According to a new rumor, that Force Origin movie is now cancelled mere months after being announced. And I knew the moment Kathleen Kennedy announced these movies that there was no way this one in particular was ever going to happen. Because, let's just take a look at the track record. Disney made a new trilogy of movies where every single installment would have a new director helming each film. So you'd think a billion-dollar corporation would have a treatment and timeline for this sort of thing, right? Wrong actually, since J.J. Abrams did what he did with Force Awakens only for Rian Johnson to get his chance with The Last Jedi, and he took everything Abrams did and threw it away. And he deconstructed the entire series and left it in such a state that when Abrams returned, all he could do is spend the last film in a trilogy by righting the wrongs of the previous film that didn't at all follow anything that was set up in the original film. Something like this wouldn't happen if the people in charge actually knew what they were doing and had a clear vision for their trilogy. This would be like if Peter Jackson did Fellowship, then Rian Johnson got Two Towers and decided to kill Gandalf completely. And you would have Aragorn lose both his legs and arms, and Frodo gets thrown into Mount Doom, and Pippin becomes the new lead of the movie. And then giving that train wreck to Peter Jackson again and go, here, you fix it. It's so evidently clear that Disney had no idea where they wanted their trilogy to go. So why am I ranting about shitty Star Wars movies when it comes to this Origin of the Force movie? Because this is Disney we're talking about. Any Origin of the Force movie was bound to be dog shit anyway. We all know Disney would find a way to make it so the first user of the Force was a black lesbian woman who's non-binary and wants to smash the patriarchy, and the main villain would be an old white man because that's politically correct. Besides, not everything needs to be explained, and oftentimes explaining nebulous concepts in lore ruins the mystique of it. I'm in the camp that even when George Lucas tried to explain the Force being tied to midichlorians, that was nonsense too. The Force is mystical, it's in everything, it is the universe, it is life, death, the in-between, and the absence of reality. Explaining something like the Force would go about as well as explaining the origin of the Doctor in Doctor Who, and we all know how fans reacted to that one. Not everything needs to be explained, and there's no way Disney would have found an acceptable way to do this anyways. It's sort of like how in the MCU when they went about explaining shit that never needed explanations. Like how the name Avenger comes from Captain Marvel's call sign as a pilot, or that Nick Fury lost his eye because an alien cat scratched it out. These inclusions of lore ruin things more. Even recently when Disney did Secret Invasion, they made Rhodey into a Skrull, hinting that the Rhodey we had in the MCU since Civil War was a Skrull all along, which now inadvertently ruins his inclusion in stuff like Infinity War and completely undermines Rhodey saying farewell to Tony in Endgame. None of these retcons make sense or better the source material. They're just cheap gotchas meant to be designed to seem clever, when in actuality they're moronic. And that's what this Origin of the Force movie would have been. Not to mention, it would have been directed by James Mangold, a guy who's notorious for deconstructing everything. Sure, he nailed it with Logan, but when Indiana Jones and the Diaper of Dysentery flopped harder than Kathleen Kennedy's career, I knew right then and there that his Star Wars movie was cooked. You really think they're gonna give the guy who wasted hundreds of millions and ruined Indy 5 the money and goodwill to go do the same thing with Star Wars? You can't be that gullible, come on. The other supposedly cancelled film is Taika Waititi's, which hasn't been named or really even announced in terms of what it could be about anyway. So this getting cancelled is whatever in the grand scheme of things, and seeing what he did with Love and Thunder, I'm not exactly ecstatic as to what he would do with Star Wars. He'd probably just make a parody of it and ruin it like he did Thor, so this is all good news really. And we already have a parody, it's called Spaceballs, and it's great. And like I said earlier, these studios and morons in charge oftentimes have no idea what they're dealing with anyway. But I hear you, dear viewer. How can you make claims like that with no evidence? Well, that leads into this next story titled, Former DC Comics publisher Dan DiDio explains why woke ideology is rampant in comics. Dan DiDio recently talked to Bounding Into Comics writer John Dale Eras on his live stream, which I will link in the description if you'd like to watch it yourself. DiDio was promoting his new series Ancient Enemies when he got asked about how corporations go about controlling and using IPs when it comes to making money. And before you watch this clip, remember that DiDio used to be the head of DC Comics, so this guy was in control of stuff like Batman, Superman, and more. So he probably knows what he's talking about. Anyway, here's that clip.
But there's this whole outcast group that's also like not getting helped by them because the corporation's just kind of screwing everybody at the same time while trying to do good. It's a huge, like, this world is a lot for 6 issues. So
it encompasses my entire life.
Yeah.
That's all I gotta say. After working for companies for over 40 years, trust me, you can't help but write about a corporation that screws people.
Yeah, right. And that touched me too. I definitely relate to corporations screwing people. So good stuff.
I used to use an expression that I actually put in the book, which I used to say, corporations don't have values. Corporations have profits. So, the only time they have values is if they think it's going to add to their profits. So when people start to talk about what a company stands for money. That's all they ever do. And if you ever think anything more than that, you're misguided. They present themselves differently. And what I like to do is pull back that veneer just to make sure that when we see the people inside the company, while they're talking quietly amongst themselves, they understand exactly what their purpose is, even if everybody else is seeing it for something else.
Well, there's a lot of hoobaloo about that, and there's so much like political culture war crap going on in comics now too, with finger pointing and all. Do you attribute most of that on the corporate level then to like incompetence when stuff starts to slide in that direction? Like it's not intentional, or are there just a few people who are really loud and
I think it's
the attention?
Yeah, I think it's a few people loud and a lot of people chasing something that they don't know. The one thing you find out in the corporate world very quickly is most of the people that work and produce things don't know anything about what they produce. Okay, they're not consumers of their own. No, it sounds stupid, but just the truth. They're not consumers of their own product. So where do they get their information on how their product is being succeeding or failing? They go online now. They're pulling information from these websites and conversations. So what you have now is you have them picking up the most dichotomous points of view, and ultimately aligning with them, which they want to believe the most. And then using that sense to basically validate the choices they're making inside the product, whether it needs it or not.
Wow, that's a lot of mental gymnastics right there. Jeez.
It is, but that's you ask how things are made. That's how things are made.
That's how things are made.
And what DiDio says here is all the proof you need from the guy who spent over 40 years within the corporate environment of IPs and the executives who milk these properties for all they're worth. These bigwig suits literally have no idea what the hell they're doing with the things that they control, whether it's Marvel, DC, Star Wars, or even video game IPs at large either. Most of these things are just controlled by old men and women who couldn't care less about the legacy of the things they have. They don't see Batman or characters like Luke Skywalker as mythic heroes of legend. They see them as monetizable slam dunks that in theory should be easy outlets to profit off of. This is why Luke sucking alien titty milk or throwing a lightsaber off a cliff meant nothing to Rian Johnson or Kathleen Kennedy. Because movies like The Last Jedi prove that the people involved don't care. They don't see iconic things like lightsabers as weapons of legend. They are just things that exist to be monetized and thrown away once their use is no longer viable anymore. Look at The Witcher and Netflix. That show should have been an easy win, but the people involved didn't care about the source material. Hell, they've been openly accused of not giving two shits about the world Andrzej Sapkowski made. They didn't see it for the unique aspects it held, like a Monster Hunter main character, the unique concept of its world or its lore. It was just an IP they could use that had a pre-installed fanbase that they could exploit for money and political reasons. It's why I'm also hesitant when I see companies buying up other companies, from Disney buying Star Wars, or Microsoft buying up things like Bethesda and more. Hell, even Sony buying Bungie. I'm still not convinced that was a good idea either. Because largely speaking, many of these executives in their cushiony suites don't care about what they have. You really think Bobby Kotick cares if Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3's campaign is good or not? All he cares is if the microtransaction store works properly at launch, so people can buy their overpriced digital items so Bobby can purchase another sports car. Kathleen Kennedy clearly doesn't care about what she's in charge of either. If she did, the current state of Star Wars, Willow, and Indiana Jones wouldn't all be flopping right now. Because whether we like to admit it or not, we all excel and treat things better when we actually give a shit about the thing that we're doing. We've all worked jobs when we were younger that we hated. Dude, when I was 17, I was a grocery bag boy at a supermarket. No life experience, no skills, nothing. You think I cared about that job or the managers who treated me like I was just a number? Of course not. You only want to give it your all when you're passionate about something. And it's so evidently clear that when it comes to things like the state of Star Wars or certain game companies, the people in charge couldn't give less of a shit if they tried. Dan DiDio knows this, and he's speaking candidly now that he's escaped the corporate hellscape that was DC Comics after 40 years at the company. Jesus Christ, dude. He worked there for longer than I have even been alive at this point. That's insane to fathom. For anyone under 40 watching this, just imagine your entire life up until this point was spent in a chair listening to morons as they find new ways to exploit the goodwill of people. Your entire life. That was Dan DiDio's reality. And the same thing he went through is what's happening over at Disney and many others like them. These corporate goblins couldn't care less about the things we love if they tried. They just show up to events and flash their fake smiles and drive away in their expensive cars as audiences eat the slop that they push out. I guarantee you if Kathleen Kennedy got sat down and was asked 20 questions about Star Wars, she would fail. You could say, what's the name of the bar in episode 4 where Luke meets Han? And Kathleen Kennedy would just smile in silence. What's Ahsoka's race called? What's the name of Boba Fett's ship originally? Who did Mads Mikkelsen play in Rogue One? What was his name again? Just blank, empty stares. There's nothing there, my friends. This is the same woman that self-inserted herself multiple times into everything she works on. Is it a coincidence that literally every project of Star Wars, Willow, or Indiana Jones content related suspiciously has a white, brown-haired woman who's incredible and capable of anything? Please, it's so obvious. This is I Am Not Starfire levels of self-insertion. And then you have bullshit like sites claiming Disney will introduce non-Force users into the Force when Rey takes over. How the hell does that even work? The only people who should be working or be involved with a literal Jedi temple without Force powers is either the janitors or the cooks. So the moment Rey becomes Grand Master of an order she barely trained within but won anyway because she's so amazing, will now be accepting literally anyone into this coveted order even if they have no powers. Actually, in a lot of ways, this new direction for the Jedi Order is very on brand for how Hollywood hires writers and the people who work on stuff. What's that? You have barely any experience on running a show? Well, we're gonna hire you anyway to manage our billion-dollar Lord of the Rings TV show. The absolute state of the Jedi Order going forward will be a bunch of dumbasses wielding lightsabers who can't use the Force, and instead got in because of their identity or connections. If that isn't the most on-brand self-inserted own of the state of a mega corporation, I don't know what is, dear viewer. And it's not like corporations haven't been able to hit gold when giving their IPs to others to work within. Baldur's Gate 3 is proof you can take an IP and make something incredible out of it when the people making it care about what they're doing. Same goes with DC when Rocksteady got their hands on Batman and made a bunch of amazing, arguably genre-defining Batman experiences. And Insomniac is doing the same with Spider-Man right now. It's never been the IP or the franchises that are the problem. Star Wars isn't dead because Star Wars as an IP is bad or something. It's dead because the people involved with taking care of it frankly couldn't care less. And that is the root cause of all of this disaster. And it's never been more prevalent than now, I would argue. To end this video, let's finish with Mark Millar, who's another comic book legend who cried out recently over the state of American comics. Of the entire comic book industry in North America, it's being reported that a measly 9% of the market share is controlled by Marvel and DC and independent comics right now, with the other 91% of the market being absolutely demolished by the Japanese manga industry. You know how badly things have to get for manga to overtake North America this easily? And I don't blame consumers for buying mangas, because at least the Japanese aren't pushing nonsense and politics onto their readers. You can read stuff like Dragon Ball, One Piece, or My Hero Academia and not really have to worry about being talked down to, or have the female characters be presented as anything but actual women. Whereas the American industry has been overtaken by activists who, like I've explained earlier, couldn't care less about the things they're in charge of. Comic book stores are closing down across the country because nobody is actually buying American comic books anymore. If anything, these stores should dump all their American stuff in the garbage and become full-blown manga stores instead, and they would probably be fine, because nobody wants to read American-made comics when the stuff being pushed is terrible and full of politics. People are sick of it. At least the Japanese know quality is integral to the sales of the content they make. Mark Miller has opened up on Twitter that he's disgusted by the state of American comics, and that the industry is dying because of its lack of quality or originality. But again, none of this is surprising to anyone who watches my channel or keeps up with this stuff. Until the woke corporations and the activists they've hired are purged, they can continue to enjoy their single-digit market share of the money pie. Customers have spoken loud and clear with their wallets already, and it's official that anti-woke, real products sell like gangbusters. Who could have thought? And the shit that pushes this garbage is rotting like Palpatine's face in Rise of Skywalker. The American comic book and movie industry is dying because of the culture war they started, by attacking fans and ruining the goodwill of the paying customer. And ultimately, until these IPs are controlled and guided by people who actually give a shit about the things they're making, the future of media will continue to die, sales will dry up, and eventually these corporations will have no one to blame but themselves. But maybe when they own nothing, they'll finally be happy. Anyway, thank you for watching, like and subscribe for more, and have a great day. I'll see you in the next one.